Hi, everyone, and happy Friday, and welcome to our 47th Inspiration Exchange. I think we're getting very close to the 50th mark, so that's quite exciting. And we've got a very exciting session today. It's AI agents in future labor markets. It's very different from our normal sessions, and I think that's what makes it quite exciting today. So just a quick overview. So today's session will start on this broader overview of AI agents in future labor markets, first with Professor van der Schaar, and I'm sure we'll introduce Dr. Simpson Zhang in a bit. And then we'll obviously have our traditional roundtable and Q&A, and I'll introduce our panelists once we get there. So I guess without further ado, let me introduce Professor van der Schaar and hand over to her.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for being present in this session. I'm unbelievably excited about this session because this topic of AI agents and how this will evolve into a future where humans and agents are going to collaborate and create a vibrant labor markets to create social good is an exciting prospect that I hope we can think about together and shape together. I'm going to start with the basics. I think most people on this call are very familiar with AI agents or LLM agents, but just for the very few among you that may not be, let me define LLM agents as AI systems that leverage the power of large language models to perform possibly complex tasks by interpreting inputs, planning actions, and executing them using integrated variety of tools. And unlike static large language models that generate single responses, AI agents can plan, can reason, can invoke all sorts of tools, can maintain memory and long-term memory, and they can operate autonomously to solve these complex tasks. Also, I don't think we need to envision these AI agents in the incarnation we see them today. As many of you know, in a previous session, I've talked about genies, which I see as a future of AI agents. I really feel that these AI agents will evolve and will evolve rapidly. And here is a manifesto that I put together half a year ago, which is available online. You can read and you can engage with it, and you can see our former session on this topic. And I think that this genies, which are the future of AI agents, will be even more capable than they are today, than the AI agents are today. For that, there is an entire machine learning agenda that needs to be evolved by us, the machine learning community. But I believe that by engaging with questions like this 101 fundamental questions, we can get there quite rapidly. And that's an exciting prospect and also a challenging one from a machine learning point of view. I really believe that these genies are going to be a lot more capable than current agents to plan, to act, to reason and validate, to build trust and foster transparency with their users, to communicate with other genies and agents and humans, to continuously learn. And very important from my perspective, build capabilities that are truly empowering for humans. And in that process, generate and innovate such that they really can improve our current capabilities. I also don't envision these agents and these genies to operate alone. In a subsequent paper that I put online, I really believe that these agents are going to work together, are going to self-organize, and are going to create economic value. And again, this paper you can find online. But it is this thinking that I've had over the last year that culminated in these two papers that let me knock at the door of a former amazing PhD student of mine who was an economist. In a previous life, I used to be doing a lot of work not only on machine learning, but also on economics. And I've been very fortunate to have numerous economic students in our lab that I supervised. And I've been a tremendous pleasure and happiness to have Dr. Simpson Zhang, who is now on this inspiration exchange, who will talk a little bit later. So I knocked at his door and I said, Simpson, I think there is really an opportunity for us to work together again and think together about this future of economics, future of labor markets. Let us think together about this. And we brought in together with Simpson current brilliant student, Tennyson Liu, who is also part of this Inspiration Exchange organization team. You keep getting messages from him. And the three of us together have tried to put together an agenda that we plan to present to you today. So really, we feel that there is an opportunity to think a little bit into the immediate and long-term future, to think about these emerging markets of intelligence, where labor is no longer exclusively human, where AI agents that are very powerful, this genius that I'm talking about, are increasingly capable to provide skills, services, and expertise. And this will not just be offered for free, it will be bought, it will be hired, and will be contracted by other agents as well as humans and organizations. And let me say up front that I hope, and I'm working very hard to see this not as a replacement of us humans, but rather as a reshaping of the collaborative environment in which work happens, where humans and AI agents are going to collaborate effectively. What type of agents? Numerous. You see here a few examples, but there are many, many more, and I look forward to talk together with our amazing collaborating panelists, Justine and Jim, to think together about other examples. But here you see some of the examples that I want us to keep in mind to anchor ideas. Cognitive task agents that may do summarization, translation, classification, transcription, or why not decision support, or coding assistant, or legal drafting. Reasoning and problem solving, from complex scientific discovery to hypothesis generation to, why not, clinical trial design. Education and mentoring agents. Our own lab is very interested in AI for social good, and we do a lot of work not only on AI for medicine, but also AI for education. So we really hope that the future will have personalization of tutors, of coaching. This is a vision that our lab has started around 15 years ago when we built our first AI-driven e-tutor, but now we are at a different frontier with Gen AI and with AI agents. Also, increasingly in the economics arena, we can see these AI agents as being bidding agents, representing us in all sorts of auctions, in all sorts of contracts, managers, but also advisors. In the more operational agenda, we are increasingly thinking about them improving and streamlining pipelines, scheduling, billings, but also planning, whether it's in a hospital setting or in an organizational setting. And these are just very few examples. I think that this will be absolutely ubiquitous in this intelligence market. And the type of labor that we will envision will shape, of course, the market. Some of the things that we talk about today will be general, but some will be very specific to the type of labor markets that we envision, the type of competition, the type of collaboration, but also the learning and reasoning mechanism that we will talk about will be shaped by the type of market that we have in mind. So what is a labor market for agents? In our view, we need to think a little bit differently than the current traditional labor markets, which is often centralized and employer-driven. Of course, in recent time, we increasingly think about platforms and distributed platforms where agents can come and talk to each other, whether it's TaskRabbit, where you put your task and you'll get people to come and solve it. But in this agentic labor, we feel, at least initially, we can envision it to be mediated through platforms like these ones, where humans and agents will provide tasks, and agents will come and they will bid for solving these tasks, will create contracts in this platform, and will collaborate with each other to be able to solve tasks. And these platforms, the reason we see this as an initial incipient form of these labor markets, it provides the right tools, initially at least, to aggregate and to provide an infrastructure for agents to provide their labor, to advertise and provide their labor, but also for humans and other agents to come to this platform to find such agents which can solve their tasks. You can think about a very general platform where all sorts of labor is provided, or more specialized settings for more specialized expert markets. in this process, there will be, of course, something that is very interesting and something that the lab has done quite a lot of. Going back 15 years working with Simpson, one of the many things we looked at was matching. How do you really match in such a market, potentially a very diverse market, buyers and sellers? And in that process, you may look at reputation of agents for a particular type of labor, which may be predictive of their success. Also, you may think about them specializing, having different levels of pricing, but also you can think about this platform doing much more than that, providing rules, providing policing of this infrastructure and of this labor, as well as incentivizing agents to compete in a good way, in a fair way, and being able to get better at solving these tasks. Also, as part of this, there are many issues. There are ethical issues. I'll talk a little bit about this at the end, but also contracts, which is a very important economic driver, may emerge, and different type of contracting for labor may emerge as well. And that's part of this agenda. As I mentioned, this has been for us a quite long 6 months conversation between Simpson, former student, amazing economist. He will tell you more about his vision in the next talk, but also somebody who is silent at this moment in time and kind of representing the work of all three of us here, is Tennyson, who has contributed tremendously to this discussion. And you can see some of our thinking. This is just part of our thinking. We plan to continue to present many more papers, so please pay attention to this agenda. This is a first paper that we have put together on arXiv more than a month ago, where we put some of the ideas presented here. But this presentation goes a little bit beyond that. So labor markets really are driven by economic challenges, and Simpson will talk a lot more eloquently than me. The economist in the room will talk much more eloquently about this. Again, going back 15 years ago, the lab was doing quite a lot of work in this area. And if you think about these economic markets and economic interactions, strategic interactions, they usually have quite a few forces. Here we talk only about 3, there are many more. One is adverse selection, where agents will misrepresent their capabilities. So I may brag, for instance, that I'm much better at solving this task than I truly am. This could be either due to incompetence or due to strategic behavior. Moral hazard, where agents may shirk after being hired. For instance, they may promise a lot but deliver very little. And the resulting, if you like, interaction is captured into a reputation which emerges as a crucial signal that you have about past behavior of agents, which will influence future behavior in the market through the form of reputation. There is an exciting agenda in machine learning that I'm going to outline in just a little bit, but there is also one in economics. If you look back to our past work and the work in general in economics in the past, up to now, very often we were thinking about equilibrium behavior. So if you look at our work on reputation, lots of work on reputation in the past, we were studying equilibrium behavior in a particular market or interaction. Now, I no longer see that. I think it's an exciting time also from an economics point of view, an economic theory point of view, and business point of view, because now we are thinking about competitive dynamics in agent markets where we no longer look at equilibria, because new competitors, new agents with different capabilities, with better capabilities, will keep emerging. And hence, agents must hedge, diversify, evolve strategies like startups do, and no longer we can talk about an equilibrium behavior. Simpson will talk more about that. I'm going back to the machine learning impact of this type of labor market. And one important area is that of reasoning, because without reasoning, agents may fail to win jobs, may get stuck at the bottom, gaining very little money and very little credibility, or even being kicked out of the market. They may also misassess their strengths, thereby harming their reputation and their long-term learning. And really the cost here is irrelevant agents. We may have a lot of agents that are no longer relevant and are superseded at fast pace. So for that, we need to have a new type of reasoning. We call it strategic reasoning, in order to enable these agents to survive and thrive in these labor markets. And in order to do that, agents should not only just act, They must think about both themselves, their abilities, as well as their competitors and the market. So what's missing from reasoning the way we are hearing about it in AI today is most AI agents today usually act once with limited long-term goals. They don't understand very well themselves or the others. And what we do need here is AI agents which exhibit an ability to anticipate, an ability to think economically and strategically. One important ingredient in this agenda is metacognition, which is really the engine behind introspective self-knowledge. So what it is, in a very short nutshell, metacognition is the ability of such agents to reflect on, evaluate, and improve their own abilities, performance, and strategies. In a paper with Tennyson that will appear in a month at ICML 2025, and it's online, that we have put together, we talk about intrinsic metacognitive learning and really how we need to push forward the AI agenda. This is a position paper. This is not an algorithm, but rather a collection of powerful ideas that we put together to try to really define this agenda of metacognitive learning, which is very important in the context of building AI agents that are successful in these labor markets. What type of introspections and metacognition that I think is really important in the context of labor markets? Number one, self-assessment. What are my current strengths as an agent as well as weaknesses? To use an economic term, what is my type? What is my capability? I need to be able to assess that. And I need to be assessing that because the task may change, may not be all one size fits all. And I need to know when I should bid for a particular task and when I should refrain from it. Also, how sure I am about knowing how good I am. And for that, what's very important is to understand the task, what kind of task it is, and how well I, as an agent, here is I being the agent, I'm turning now into an agent, I is the agent, how well do I understand this task? How uncertain I am whether I can complete the task effectively and the reward that I'm going to get, the benefits and the cost I'm going to get by solving this task if I decide to do so and I'm chosen to do so. For that, another problem is that of problem-solving approaches. I need, as an agent, to non-stop assess my ability and my evolving capability to know whether there are better ways of doing this task that I have not tried before. So here is we move into a new type of machine learning where I need to non-stop change my behavior and learn and try to get better at it. So the agents of today are kind of frozen. Genies of the future are going to be non-stop learning and continuously learning to get better at things. And for that, they may need to discover new actions, new strategies, tools, and heuristics, going way beyond what you see today in reinforcement learning. Why this matters? Again, without these agents cannot understand their competitive advantage with respect to other agents. They may not be able to select for which jobs to compete. They don't know how to improve over time. Their own self-esteem, it's inaccurate, and they may be overconfident or underconfident. So what's important is not only metacognition, but kind of a related brother is this engine of strategic reasoning about others. So we coined this term strategic reasoning as the agent's capability to anticipate, interpret, and adapt the behaviors, intentions, and capabilities of other agents and potentially humans that may be active in this market, either as buyers of labor or as competitors of labor. So I need to do competitor modeling. Who is in this market? Who is going to come in this market? What are their capabilities? What are their incentives? What are their reputations? And don't forget, the way in which we learn about others is through, especially in this incipient way in which there will be platforms for labor markets. I may have some information that's public about what other people are in this market, what's their reputation, what is their specialization, what are the reviews. And on the basis of this, as well as potential indirect information I may have about these other competing agents, I'm able to think strategically about others, thereby designing my own options of acting in the short run, but also in the long run. A related and exciting topic is that of theory of mind, but a little bit different than the way we hear about theory of mind in other scenarios. We believe there is a new type of strand of work that needs to happen within this agenda. And questions such as, what do other agents believe about me and the task that is currently under discussion? How will they act based on their beliefs? Another related area is maybe I cannot solve this task, but maybe I can collaborate and hire other agents. I can subcontract other agents. So you can envision already a very elaborate market where there will be agents involving other agents that may be subcontracted, where contracts need to be made, and where this all evolves quite dynamically. So we need to have capabilities for agents that evolve over time. We need self-experimentation to improve metacognition capabilities. We need self-improvement to self-improve task-solving capabilities. And we need continuous adaptation and learning with respect to this strategic behavior. These are just some of the many things we believe need to be continuously improving. Now, this brings us to a new and I think unbelievably exciting agenda for machine learning research, economic research as well, more by that by Simpson. But from an ML point of view, I think metacognition can go to another level by not only reasoning about the self, but also about the task, about the labor, about the changing nature of labor, but also about competitors in this particular market. Also, opportunities for strategic and foresighted learning, planning, and decision making, which go unbelievably beyond what you see today in reinforcement learning and planning. And all this requires not new tweaking of ML tools, but rather very new way of thinking. So very exciting, I think. Also, we need new benchmarks. We no longer need to think in the conventional way. We need new simulating labor markets. We need to understand new test beds. We need to understand how economic forces play a role and evaluate these markets and agents evolving in such situations. So I want to end by an invitation to collaborate. We need to build foundations in this area. I think it's a very new area of machine learning. This is not just a niche. I believe it's a new emerging area of ML and of economics, this agentic AI labor markets, a very exciting one, but one where we need to build not only algorithms, but also foundations in machine learning, but also in ethics, in fairness, in competition, in really building human empowering agent labor markets where we humans can benefit from rather than be replaced. And for that, we need ML expertise, we need game theoretic expertise, we need business, we can marketing design, cognitive science, policy, and much, much more. So please get in touch with us and let us work together because this is a very complex but very exciting agenda. Simpson, I think that now the floor is yours to present the economic perspective of this.
Thank you so much, Mihaela. Really appreciated that excellent presentation. Today I will be discussing the position paper that we wrote together that Mihaela had introduced, discussing agents and what kinds of reasoning capabilities they will need to succeed in the coming labor markets. First, a bit about myself. As Mihaela mentioned, I am an economist by training, but I'm recently working with Mihaela due to, I think, the incredible importance of her work and the exciting nature of this work. A lot of current research on AI and machine learning, I think, is very impactful and deeply powerful recently, but it's missing some of the economic aspects that are going to be very important. And as you will see in this talk, I believe, and we believe that these will shape the future of the economy. So our focus, at least for this current project, is on labor markets.
Simpson, sorry to interrupt. Are you sharing your screen? I don't think we are seeing your screen yet.
Sure. Let me share my. Can you see it now?
Yeah, there we go. Yeah,
okay, excellent.
Thanks.
Yeah, so this is the introduction, so that's perfect. So I want to talk about labor markets. Why do we want to care about labor markets? Well, very simple. If an agent is created, but no one is willing to assign it a job or assign it to real tasks, then it won't do anything. It can be the most powerful, most capable, most effective agent in the world, but if no one's using it, then it's not going to have an impact. So therefore, agents need to navigate these labor markets. They need to be employed by companies, by clients, by people in order to actually have an effect. And as an economist, I can tell you that labor markets are often not efficient. So just because you are the best or the most capable person, that does not mean you will be put into the job. As such, agents need to not only reason about the specific tasks that they are able to do, but about the actual labor markets themselves. Now, these future labor markets with agents, we believe will be extremely complicated and extremely complex. One area is that the future contracts will change. Right now, LLMs are employed via very simple types of contracts. The most common are either subscription services, you pay a certain amount of money per month to use AI service, or a charge per the amount of usage. So the amount of tokens that are output, you pay a specific rate for. When agents become more complicated and they are actually taking over full jobs, we believe that these very simple contracts are going to be replaced by more complex contracts. For instance, a client that's hiring an agent to do a job may want to pay the agent based on its actual output. This is very common in the real world. For instance, if you're a lawyer, you get paid more if you win your case. And the client may want to specify a contract that says, if you are able to succeed, I will pay you more than if you fail. And the agent must reason about that contract and decide both its probability of succeeding in the contract and whether it wants to take it initially. That's just one example of the types of complex reasoning that will be required. Another reason labor markets will be very complicated is because of incomplete information. This is very much a factor in current labor markets, but as agents are introduced and as they develop over time, this will, I think, only become more important because not many people will have experience with agents initially, and the field of AI is so rapidly evolving that new agents are being introduced all the time that very few clients or people are going to be familiar with them. There's some benchmarking that's done on agents before the release, but we know that this is often not very well correlated with real-world performance. So incomplete information and the associated economic forces will be a major factor in these future labor markets. Because of this, we believe that agents, in order to navigate these markets effectively, are going to need advanced reasoning capabilities, in particular metacognition and strategic reasoning, which Mihaela introduced a few minutes ago, and I will also be discussing during this talk. Before I go any deeper, let me provide an example that's very grounded in reality, and this is clinical trial recruitment. So when new drugs are being developed, they have to undergo clinical trial testing. And in order to succeed, you need to recruit the right participants to participate. And these participants have to be of the right demographics groups. They have to have certain characteristics that need to be well balanced in order for the study to be effective. This is a very complicated and very difficult and potentially very expensive decisions that are being made in the real world currently. And imagine, let's say, an agent that is being developed in order to complete this task of the clinical trial recruitment. It has to make many complex decisions under uncertainty, where to recruit, for instance, which cities to be located in, which types of patients it needs to recruit for its job, the recruiting method, the method that uses to reach out to participants. Each different methods have different costs, and just the overall time it's going to budget itself, let's say 1 month, 2 months to complete this process, given the constraints of the clients. The agent has specific capabilities, so they may be good at certain parts of this task and bad at other parts. So for instance, they may be very good at performing analysis, but they may not be very good at reaching out to the actual participants and recruiting them. And they have to make decisions based on that. If they're not good at certain areas, perhaps they try to subcontract and hire a different agent or a human to help with that. Now, competition is also a very important part of this problem because competitors, and these are other agents or people that are performing clinical trial recruitment at the same time, are going to affect your own decisions. If you're located in a certain city that's already going through a lot of other clinical trials, well, those participants are not available in your pool, and if you're targeting some rare disease, it may be very hard for you to replace those participants. So you not only have to reason about yourself as the agent, you have to reason about what your competitors are doing at the same time, the strengths and capabilities of those competitors, which will impact your own success on this project. When these types of tasks are assigned, for instance, consider pharmaceutical companies that are considering agents to use for this type of clinical trial recruitment, they will review agents' past performance. So an agent that has done clinical trial recruitment in the past will have a history of successes or failures. If it has more successes than failures, then it will have a better reputation, and prospective clients may value hiring it more and offer it a better contract. As such, agents that are participating in this multiple dynamic model need to reason about future actions. So if it succeeds or fails today, that's going to directly impact how much money it can make in the future from the future contracts that's offered. So as you can see in this example, there's an extreme amount of very complicated decisions that have to be made by the agents. And that's why we believe these advanced reasoning capabilities are very much necessary for the agent to succeed and do well in this type of example. So this slide provides an overview of the system, and we think there's three main things to consider. First, the economic forces that are in the labor market. Mihaela briefly introduced these, but they are adverse selection, moral hazard, and reputation, and they arise because of incomplete information, which is going to be very important. The second is the actual agent actions that the agent can take, and we classify these as both external or on-the-job actions. So these are outward-facing actions, which include whether it accepts jobs and what it does in the jobs itself, and whether, for instance, to subcontract or hire colleagues. These are actions that it does in the real world. We also classify another type of actions called internal actions, which are the self-improvement aspect of agents. So it needs to invest in its own learning capabilities. It needs to learn about what those capabilities are and come up with a plan to improve over time, and also needs to learn about others. So for instance, the competitors that are in the marketplace, it needs to learn about those competitors, and that may affect its own decisions as well. And then the third leg of this trifecta are the capabilities of the agent that will affect how it chooses its actions. And these are the metacognition and the strategic reasoning. Metacognition is your internal thinking about your own quality, about how well you can understand your tasks, and how well you can pick the best strategies. Strategic reasoning is your thinking about others, including your theory of mind, understanding the beliefs and thoughts of others, understanding the decisions made by others, such as your competitors, and understanding the strategies of other people over time. Critically, all three legs of this trifecta are co-evolving and change dynamically over time. So the economic forces in the market are a function of the actions that the agents take. The actions are a function of their capabilities, and then the capabilities will also be directly impacted by the economic forces. So all of these evolve and change over time, and it's a very complex and very difficult system to assess. So let me talk a bit more about each of these aspects. First, in terms of economic forces, there's three of them. Adverse selection arises when you have incomplete information about the qualities or capabilities of agents. So certain agents can do very well in a task, and other agents are not as effective. And as a client, you don't know which one is the better agent and which one is the worst agent, and that may cause you to make inefficient hiring decisions. You may make mistakes and hire agents that are worse than others. Secondly is moral hazard, which is also incomplete information, but it's the incomplete information about the actions that the agents take. So once the agent is hired, the client cannot perfectly observe everything the agent is doing. And the agent, for instance, could take actions that are not to the best interest of their clients. For instance, spending more money than is necessary, or even if there's issues with safety and alignment, taking actively harmful or malicious actions that the client is not aware of. And finally, the third leg of this is the reputation, which is the information that employers will have about agents as they continue to work and as they produce output. Agents that succeed on tasks will develop good reputations, and agents that don't succeed will have poor reputations, and this will impact the contracts that clients are willing to offer, as well as the ability of agents to even be employed in future periods. Secondly, the agent actions. As I explained, there's both the external, which we call short-term actions. You can think of these as actions you take on the job itself, including first and foremost, whether you accept the job based on your contract. You're given a contract, maybe the amount of money that's being offered in the contract is not sufficient, so the agent should not even take it in the first place, for instance. Secondly, given that you've accepted a job as the agent, how much effort you put into the job, and also how much expense and cost is being put into the job. So agents obviously run on compute. Given a certain task, are you going to spend 1 week of compute on it, or is this something you're willing to spend 1 month of compute on? And that is very much also a function of the contract that's being offered and how much compensation you're given for certain levels of accomplishment in the task. And then finally, there's the hiring of potential colleagues or subcontracting. If you have certain weaknesses as the agent and you recognize that, then you may subcontract and go on the labor market on the supply side and try to hire someone to help you with that. On the flip side, there's also the internal long-term actions because this is a very dynamic and long-term problem. The agents have to consider not just what they're doing today in their current job, but how can the agent set itself up for success in the future? And that includes learning about its actual capabilities, um, understanding how to improve and develop its capabilities. So, for instance, in that clinical trial example, if it's good at analysis but bad at recruitment, then maybe it does some sort of self-training. It spends some of its compute budget on training its recruitment capabilities to improve that, and in future it doesn't need a subcontract anymore for that. And then also learning strategically about others. The agent needs to understand whether its competitors are strong or weak. For instance, if it realizes that its competition is very strong at the moment, then perhaps the agent realizes it needs to spend more of its budget computing on improving its own capabilities this period. So having said that, I'm going to currently introduce just a simple, very stylized mathematical model to just sort of ground our discussion. And hopefully this can shed light to some of the forces I've been discussing. So first, consider an agent I. It has a hidden type theta in this is a multidimensional vector. The dimensionality of it could depend on a specific problem. And it chooses a set of external actions A sub I, which is also again, multidimensional, and it can be many different actions depending on what each job requires. These type and actions will determine its job output. So that's, for instance, the amount of sales it produces or its success on a certain job, which is given by the function z. And also, there's a certain cost that can depend both on the type of the agent as well as the actions that it chooses. The agent is offered a contract by clients, P, which is a function critically only of the output, and the agent can either accept or reject this contract. Note that P does not depend on the type or the actions of the agent directly because these are hidden and cannot be observed. That's the moral hazard and adverse selection that I had just mentioned. Outcomes of previous jobs. So for instance, the Z or some noisy signal of Z is going to be recorded, and future clients will be able to see that in the agent's reputation, which we denote by H. And as clients observe H, they will adjust their offers based on what H says. Agents will also take costly internal actions A prime, which are not observed and are also not directly impacting the current period's job output Z, but will impact, for instance, its future type or its future costs and affects its ability to do well on future tasks. Given that, again, very simple formulation, we can write an optimization problem of the agent as an infinite period optimization problem. Basically, we just sum up all of the profits that it makes from its contracts across every period and subtract the costs. Again, the profits depend on the output in each period T, and the costs depend on the agent's type in each period T, as well as both the internal and external actions that are chosen. The explicit costs are given by this cost function C, and we know that there's also implicit costs, such as opportunity costs if you don't take certain jobs, or reputation costs if you do badly that are not directly in this cost function, but affect basically your payments in future periods. And we can even extend this a bit by adding competition. We can make the agent's output function Z a function of the types of other agents, which we would know by minus I, both the types and the actions of other agents in every period. And for instance, if other agents have very high types or are taking very strong actions, then that will lower your own output. And that's something that the agent has to reason about. So again, this is a very simple mathematical framework. In the paper, we do go a bit further, so I encourage people who are interested to look into that. But there's a lot of work and a lot of research that can be done. All of these functions P, Z, C, the agents has to reason about, and there could be embedded uncertainty in, for instance, the output function Z, as well as the cost function C, that the agent needs to learn about over time. So these can be very sophisticated and complicated problems, even given this relatively simple mathematical framework. So how does the agent solve that problem? Well, it is a very difficult problem to solve, and to do so, it needs two types of reasoning capabilities: metacognition and strategic reasoning. I think Mihaela did a very good explanation of both of these earlier, so I won't be repetitive, but just to say, again, metacognition is your internal reasoning and understanding of yourself and your own capabilities and improving those capabilities over time. Strategic reasoning is an external form of reasoning about others, understanding what others are doing, and understanding the actions and capabilities of others. These are both areas of research, nascent research. There's not it's relatively underdeveloped in the AI ML field, but there has been work on this both in metacognition and strategic reasoning. In metacognition, for instance, current research has found challenges with agents' understanding of themselves because of hallucination issues, difficulties evaluating themselves, and difficulties understanding their goals. Some proposed solutions include instructional prompting, rewriting prompts in certain ways to mitigate these issues, as well as analyzing output token likelihoods to understand agents' beliefs in a more sophisticated way. Agents also have limited understanding of their task requirements and task difficulties, and they also currently have difficulty selecting the best problem-solving strategies and the required depth and complexity that agents need to use to solve these problems. Similarly, there's a lot of challenges with strategic reasoning. The theory of mind is currently rudimentary. There's some evidence that agents can have internal representations of others' beliefs, but they still struggle with nuanced scenarios and have superficial understanding of social dynamics. Testing of agents in strategic settings, such as stylized matrix games, has been performed, but in relatively more complex scenarios, they deviate significantly from optimal play. And interestingly enough, they do perform somewhat well in tasks requiring language understanding as language models such as werewolf and diplomacy. And finally, imitation reinforcement learning has also been suggested as a way to improve strategic reasoning. But whether these are very applicable in large scale and dynamic settings is a very challenging problem. Now, let me finish by just discussing economic models a bit and why this problem is not so well addressed by current economic frameworks. So economic models, we have both classical economic models, which are very stylized and have very neat, clean solutions, and they use the assumption of fully rational agents that will take optimal decisions and can compute and understand optimal decisions and will act according to what's known as Nash equilibrium. These models are analyzed in steady state and there's very little dynamics usually, especially not of the sort that's very complex as in a model I just presented. It also minimizes the role of language by not considering how language has a very important impact on agents' behavior outside of what's known as just cheap talk in economics. There's a separate field of economics known as behavioral economics that tries to address some of these limitations and studied humans for the last few decades. It allows for heuristics to be used instead of full rationality. So humans do not act perfectly rationally. That's very clear and also shown experimentally. And behavioral economics uses heuristics instead of full rationality, allows agents to make suboptimal decisions and do things that are not ideal but have been shown empirically to hold. So I think this is a very promising area, but behavioral economics has only focused on human behavior so far. So we think there's a need for agentic behavioral economics, so to speak. See how agents, which again are not going to act perfectly rationally, are behaving in the simulated or other types of test environments, understanding their strengths and limitations, see if they have behavioral biases as humans do, or what behavioral biases are different from humans. And there's some nascent work on this area as well that we think is very interesting and very important. So that's my talk. Thank you very much for listening, and very excited to keep with our panel.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Mihaela and Simpson. Um, yes, let's jump to the panel without further ado. And let me introduce our two really awesome panelists, and we want to thank them for taking their time. So the first is Dr. Jim Weatherall, who is the VP of Data Science and AI at AstraZeneca. And then we've got Dr. Justine Rochon, who is the SVP of Biostatistics and Data Science at Boehringer Ingelheim. So we're really excited to have you both here again after a bit of time. And maybe I can kick it off, and I'll start with you, Jim. And I guess the question, having seen the two presentations, really from your side, how do you see like agents being used in the case of like AstraZeneca and in the biopharma industry, and how would it relate to this like marketplace that is being discussed?
Yeah, thanks. No, it's a fascinating and fast-moving area, isn't it? I mean, as you might imagine, we've got lots of places already where we're thinking about or testing the use of agents kind of internally. So if you think of like an internal marketplace in a company, you know, there's ways we can use agents to help us sort of trade knowledge, debate scientific decisions, you know, make our labs more productive, etc. But I think what the presentations today really got me thinking about is that sort of external marketplace. So think about all the things that a pharmaceutical company does. We buy products, we sell products, we interact with other companies, we we sort of trade medicines, if you want to put it like that. Imagine if a lot of those kind of processes could be sort of mediated by agents. I hadn't really thought of that before. Imagine if a lot of that could be kind of automated. Then I think the industry could be a very interesting sort of use case, example case for how does this company now sort of interact with the rest of the world if it's agentic interactions in that marketplace rather than rather than human interactions. I don't know. Imagine in the future if an agent kind of negotiates the price of a medicine or something. I mean, I'm just kind of making up something that's kind of crazy, but maybe in 100 years' time, or even 10 years' time, that might be what happens. So yeah, definitely some thoughts have been sparked from this idea of a marketplace in the outside world for agents. Yeah.
And I guess just building on from what Jim has mentioned, I know you've got both like the data science and ML background, but also I guess the psychology background. And kind of how would you say, like, what additional capabilities do you think current agents would need to do if they were to perform this like full job that Jim is talking about, like in your domain? When you think of both the ML side, but also like when you think of these agents would be part of the team effectively.
This is a great question, and thank you, first of all, for inviting me, and also for this fascinating two presentations. I have to say, I was, as you just said, I mean, I do data science. I'm also a psychologist by training, but I love economics. And when I heard about the topic, I was thinking, wow, that's really a really nice combination. And you just asked me, what I was thinking about. During the presentations, also when I read the papers, I was thinking about, because you mentioned heuristics in your presentations, and you mentioned also the behavioral science. Of course, from this perspective, how can we incorporate this into the agents? How can you predict behaviors and, anticipate how especially the external competitors or negotiators will behave and respond? How can you perhaps even get a flavor of what their next steps will be, given nonetheless that there is no certainty. There is a lot of uncertainty. And I was also thinking, perhaps this is a second topic, about risk literacy. Why? Because I was just teaching this 2 weeks ago, but also on the other hand, this has also a lot to do with heuristics, numbers, and also how people communicate risks and benefits. And when you could incorporate this into this topic, I think we would get a little bit more of this, behavior in real world.
I guess, Simpson, I'd be keen to pull you into this here and kind of see what you think.
Yes. Yes. So absolutely. I think the heuristics are an important part of this, understanding how agents are going to interact. And it's a very difficult problem because agents are improving all the time. So the agent last year, the agent this year, the agent next year may have different heuristics and may behave in a different or much more sophisticated way over time. So both how we as humans, if we are collaborating with agents actually as coworkers on certain tasks, how well we can understand them and how much we trust them is very much a function of how well we can understand what they're going to do. As well as the agents themselves, they need to learn about other agents as they're being introduced and make some assumptions. If this new model just came out and it's so much more powerful, maybe I can offload more tasks to that certain model. I think there's a lot of interesting discussion to be had here.
Bill, maybe if I can jump in, I know I'm prepared. If you allow me to ask both Jim and Justine, because they are in a particular type of market, the pharma market. Do you see such a market, such a platform existing? Can you envision this type of platform where maybe pharma companies could come and agents can bid their resources, or quite vice versa, where maybe pharma agents can provide their services and others can come and buy such services from them? How do you envision this market within your industry? And Justine, I'm going to start with you, because while Nabil said you have a psychology and statistics background, you also have an MBA. So I'm going to push you there, and then I'm throwing the ball to Jim.
All good, all good. And I have to say, when I just listened to you and also listened again to the presentation, you said something about, who would actually buy it, right? And I, I remember the times when I did my degrees, but also talked to many people. I mean, there is no business without a buying customer. So if you think, who would use these agents and who would also benefit from them, I definitely see I would say a buying customer also in our field of pharma and beyond. It's not just pharma. In which areas? I mean, perhaps in all those areas, without being now very specific, where we don't have complete information and where we see what we are doing ourselves, but also don't know perhaps what the others are doing at the same time. Have just an idea, but not this certain information. So again, I think we look into competitive intelligence, I would say, all over the time. And if we would go into this direction, I think we would find, I would do proper market research, of course, and see at the end, what are the needs of the customer, in this case of the pharmaceutical company, but it's also a broad field. So you would need to look, from my perspective, into different, I would say, sub-teams and see, is it perhaps in our area of data science, which is broader, or is it something more specific that is for lawyers, or that is more for people who really work in production, etc., etc. Jim, I don't know what you think about it.
Thanks a lot, Jim.
Yeah, I'm glad you went first, because I had time to scribble down some ideas, because we are on the spot, right? We haven't really thought too much about this in advance, but two things occurred to me. Firstly, is just the whole market for like contract services. So a lot of pharma companies, we do a lot in-house, but we also outsource a lot, whether that's getting preclinical lab work done, clinical processes, supply chain, etc. I could imagine an agentic marketplace that kind of brokers some of those services and sort of does the optimal matchmaking between companies in our sector and the kind of services that we need, and sort of create this optimal ecosystem where no one company has to have all the answers, but across the network, you can meet any needs, and all the needs of the companies get met. And then to Justine's point about sort of intelligence and competitive intelligence, the other thing we do is we go and sort of make acquisitions. So we might see or partnering. So we see like a biotech company that we really want to work with. It's really difficult to keep track of them all. So what we typically know is that we have a need. Like we want to purchase an asset in this space, or we'd really like to discover whether there's a biotech that excels in this particular area of biology. Again, agentic services could help to broker that. I mean, the kind of manual assessment of all this intelligence kind of seems like it really should be a thing of the past. And I've actually got a little secret, which is that I'm ashamed to say I did not have time to read the two papers that you kindly sent. So we actually put them in an agentic tool to summarize them for me. So we've started playing around with something called Notebook LM, which does a terrific job of pulling out the key points. So I actually use an agent to help broker getting me to today based on the information you sent as well. So it's already happening.
Amazing. If you allow me, Nabil, maybe one follow-up question. I promise to shut up because I'm so excited about Justine's and Jim's. So how do you feel if these markets would indeed occur, markets for biodiscovery, for clinical trials, and why not in the healthcare domain, in the medical and healthcare domain? Do you see that the pharmas of the future would change? Would they look different? Would your organizations look different? And if yes, how so?
I can start if you like, and then give Justine the thinking time this time. I think an area that's been talked about for a long time is this kind of ecosystem that I mentioned, and whether sort of biodiscovery, let's just call it that kind of initial like hypothesis work around understanding of disease and pathophysiological mechanisms and all this type of thing, whether that can be essentially federated. And then what big companies do is we're really awesome at then taking those ideas, really productionizing them, commercializing them, if you want to use IT terminology, and really turning them into real medicines from which patients can benefit. So I do wonder whether there's again, to use the term, a kind of marketplace for services in that very early area of biology that really is a team sport, and we really benefit from the proliferation of the world's knowledge rather than try and solve biology inside a single company.
And I will go perhaps in a slightly different direction, because now I had my thinking time. I recently participated again in a roundtable where we were thinking, how would we design, or how would we, I would say, build a company from scratch in our nowadays world, right? It would probably look completely different. And also with regards to what you just said, could we be much more simple? Could we focus more? Could we accelerate more without all this machinery behind this? Yeah. At the other hand, we would need something that would give us this dashboard-like, real-time information from all over the places. And last but not least, you mentioned, Mihaela, a lot about collaboration. I think it's not just, pharma at the end, because we have so many key stakeholders around us. So if we go for this direction, we would need to incorporate the competitors' view, but also the feedback from our key stakeholders like policymakers, regulators, and payers, and so on and so on. So I think this is perhaps a field to go forward.
And then I guess in the essence of time, it's probably the last one, and maybe it's the more open-ended question of them all. It's having seen everything, having seen like the position paper, all of the challenges that have been laid out, from your perspective to the ML researchers in like the broader audience, like which of these challenges do you think is probably the most impactful, especially for your industry to be able to address such that you can like trust such an agent and such a marketplace? And I guess whoever wants to take the first stab at it and whoever wants the thinking time.
Yeah, I mean, maybe again off the top of my head, I think the whole world's still grappling with how to validate agents and how to know what good looks like, and does it have to be is human performance the gold standard? Do we care? So I mean, those are very general problems, right? They don't just apply to our industry, but I think given that we're heavy on the science, certainly in AstraZeneca, people look for a certain degree of like believability, credibility in what sort of scientific reasoning agents are telling them, for example. So I think if you can help us with what that looks like, is it agents using self-reflection? Is it agents checking the work of other agents? Do we need to have a whole stream of research around validation agents? It would be good to get some sort of grasp on how you sort of validate the performance of an agent for scientific reasoning, for example.
And from my perspective, you ask about the challenges and opportunities. I would say we are all right now looking into how can we improve productivity, of course, perhaps also with this kind of agent. And I still like to, emphasize this component of what you mentioned during the talks about reputation, about, I would say, also emotional intelligence, but also perhaps about, I would call them warm wins. So for those agents that create more value through a specific, I would say, human-like behavior, that it's not easy to mimic nowadays.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense. And I guess, Simpson, if you'd want to leave us with last parting thoughts.
Sure, yes. So I think, again, that the economic side of this is something that is very exciting and can be really well developed. As I see agents today, they're not really making economic decisions. You ask it to do a task, it will do the task, but you have to tell it how much time you're willing to spend on it, how much compute you're willing to give it, and the agent does not really decide itself. So when you productionalize this, you think of a worker in the real world, you give them a certain job and they have to say, I'm going to spend, 1 or 2 days on this. They have to make a decision, and you don't want to be, as a client, micromanaging every aspect of that. So I think that's a very important goal that needs to be developed. The agent being able to make effective economic decisions, economic trade-offs, balance both the benefits and the costs of each amount of unit of labor that it puts into every task. If it does not do that, it's just going to go overboard. It's not going to make the optimal decisions. And I think until we have a good grasp on the economic side of things and have the economic reasoning in place, we're not fully there yet.
Awesome. Thanks so much. And I think definitely across our last three comments, you can definitely see the broad-reaching considerations that I think to advance this research agenda we'll need to grapple with. And I hope that's some nice food for thought for everybody. And I guess with that there, that probably concludes our session for today. I really wanted to thank Jim and Justine for joining us and let everybody know that our next session will be on the 10th of July where the lab will be talking about the wide variety of papers at ICML 2025, and that will be our last session before the break for the summer. So I hope everybody has a really great weekend, and thanks so much, Jim and Justine, for joining again.
Thank
Been a
you.
great pleasure.
Thanks,
Thanks,
everyone.
everyone.